By the time the Islamic caliphate ended in 1924, 270 million people around the world were killed by Islam. 270 million. And we didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and there was nuclear weapons. All of these people were killed, butchered by the sword.
What's up? It's great to have you here. Today we're breaking down something that's going to challenge what you think you know about history. Brigitte Gabriel, a Lebanese-American activist who survived the Lebanese Civil War, is presenting a historical account that traces 14 centuries of Islamic expansion, governance systems, and conflicts that most Western education never covers. She's making some bold claims about historical casualty figures, the origins of certain persecution practices, and connections between historical Islamic empires and modern extremist movements. You'll want to stay through the entire breakdown because the way she connects these historical dots is going to make you rethink everything you learned in school. Before we jump in, I'd love to know. Drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're calling home today. It's always awesome seeing where this community reaches. All right, let's get into this.
After the year of the Hijra, after Muhammad went to Medina and the Jews did not accept him, he became a military warrior and declared war on them and started expelling them. Jews and Christians became dhimmi, or second-class citizens. They were only allowed to stay alive and not be killed only by paying the jizya, or the protection tax. So they had a choice: convert to Islam, or if you want to stay alive, you have to pay the jizya or protection tax, living as dhimmi in the Islamic nation. Christians and Jews could not ring church bells. Jews could not blow the shofar. Christians could not ring church bells. They could not pray publicly. Christians and Jews could not gather together and build new churches or new temples. And the way they paid the jizya, or the protection tax, was in a monthly ceremony where they would get together downtown and the Jew would kneel on his knee and hand his goods to the mullah, who would take the goods as the price for buying the protection. And in many areas, Jews and Christians were given necklaces to wear as a receipt that they paid their jizya, or their protection tax. Jews considered najis under Islam. Najis is bodily fluid. Najis is garbage. Najis is dogs. Najis is dirty. So Christians and Jews were treated as second-class citizens. Islam continued to grow. As Islam grew, more people became dhimmi, or second-class citizens. Jews and Christians were given identifiable clothing. The yellow star, which was given to the Jews, that most people think is a German invention. It was actually an Islamic invention in the 9th century in Iraq by the second Khalif al-Mutawakkil of Iraq, who invented the yellow star for the Jews to be identified as they walked down the street. Because Jews were considered najis, if a Muslim man or a Jew walked on the same side of the street, the Jew had to cross the other side so the Muslim man can walk, so he's not dirtied by the filth of the Jew. Christians were given the zunnar, the belt, which most of you men are wearing right now. That was an Islamic invention for the Christians. Islam continued to grow. They went all the way to Jerusalem. They conquered Jerusalem. Christians couldn't ring their church bells in Jerusalem. The Pope in Rome in 1090 told the Christians, how could you sit idly by and allow your brethren to suffer like this in the Holy Land? You need to go liberate the Christians. You need to go help the Christians. That's why the Crusaders were launched. The Crusaders were not launched because they just felt like waking up in the morning and going and converting a bunch of Muslims or beheading them. The Crusaders were launched to liberate Jerusalem. And they were able to liberate Jerusalem for less than 100 years before Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, Saladin, took it back, and Jerusalem remained under Islamic control until 1967, when the State of Israel liberated Jerusalem, where Christians, Jews, and Muslims could pray under the same sky. The Crusaders continued fighting Islam, and for 300 years they tried and failed. And by the 1300s, the Crusaders disappeared because they could not win against Islam.
Brigitte Gabriel presents her interpretation of early Islamic history. According to her account, he became a military warrior and declared war on them and started expelling them. This represents one historical perspective on how early Islamic leadership evolved. Academic historians offer various interpretations of this period, examining religious, political, economic, and military factors that influence these developments. Gabriel discusses the jizya system that developed across Islamic territories. She describes it as convert to Islam, or if you want to stay alive, you have to pay the jizya or protection tax. The jizya was a tax system applied to non-Muslims in Islamic states. Historians continue to analyze its implementation, noting significant variations across different regions, time periods, and ruling dynasties. Some scholars compare it to taxation systems in other medieval empires, while others examine the religious and political implications of such policies. Gabriel references social classification systems. She mentions Jews considered najis under Islam. Najis is bodily fluid, najis is garbage, najis is dogs. Different Islamic legal traditions interpreted purity concepts differently, and practices varied considerably across the Islamic world, geographically and chronologically. Understanding these historical social structures requires examining specific regional contexts and time periods. Gabriel highlights a historical detail about identity markers. She notes the yellow star, which was given to the Jews, that most people think is a German invention. It was actually an Islamic invention. Distinctive clothing requirements for religious minorities appeared in various medieval societies across different civilizations. Historians document such practices in certain Islamic territories during specific periods. These historical details contribute to broader understanding of how different societies structured communal relationships. Medieval societies globally experienced complex dynamics involving religious diversity, governance structures, and cultural exchange alongside periods of conflict.
Islam continued to expand. They went all the way to Central Europe. They went all the way to China. They went to India. They conquered Spain. They changed the name of Spain from Spain to Andalusia. And they started, as they advanced, as they conquered more nations, more people paid the jizya or the protection tax. And this is how the Islamic Empire grew. It went all the way until they was stopped at the gates of Vienna on 9/11. 9/11 is not a date that Osama bin Laden just picked out of a hat. 9/11 is a symbolic date in the Islamic calendar. By the 1600s, Islam had covered more of the earth's surface than the Roman Empire did at its peak. Between the 1600s and the 1800s, the Europeans were experiencing the European Industrial Revolution, where the Europeans were able to invent products on factory lines, where they are able to make money and sell products, which gave them the money to build a strong army in order to fight the Muslims. And that's how they were able to stop them at the gates of Vienna on 9/11. The Europeans started the pushback against Islam. They pushed them out of Europe. They pushed them out of all the way to the Middle East and North Africa. By 1924, the Islamic Empire ended. In 1924, the Islamic Caliphate ended in Turkey by President Ataturk, who was a secularist. He ended the Islamic Empire, and he gave women rights to vote. He gave women a right to an education, a right to work, a right to choose a husband. He forbid women from wearing the hijab. He forbid men from wearing the beard. The Muslim hate him so much that they consider him a Jewish agent, because they believe that his mother in her bloodline was Jewish, and that was the influence on Ataturk. By the time the Islamic Empire or the Islamic Caliphate or the Islamic State ended in 1924, the Islamic Caliphate had existed for 1400 years, and it ended less than 100 years ago. By the time the Islamic Caliphate ended in 1924, 270 million people around the world were killed by Islam. 270 million. And we didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and there was nuclear weapons. All of these people were killed, butchered by the sword. The people in the world, less than 100 years ago, how many people knew this history? Please raise your hand. We in America have failed to educate our children about history. We in America failed to educate our population about history. Our children in high school, you take any 17, 16-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, and ask them about World War II. They can't even tell you what happened in World War II. For them, it's ancient history, and we still have our World War II veteran walking among us. That's how little we know of history.
Gabriel traces territorial expansion across multiple continents over many centuries. She makes an observation about symbolic references stating, 9/11 is not a date that Osama bin Laden just picked out of a hat. 9/11 is a symbolic date in the Islamic calendar. According to her analysis, this connects to historical events. Scholars who study extremist movements examine how such groups reference historical narratives, though interpretations of these connections vary among researchers. Gabriel emphasizes the historical longevity of caliphate systems. She observes, the Islamic caliphate had existed for 1,400 years, and it ended less than 100 years ago. The caliphate represented various forms of governance across different dynasties, regions, and centuries rather than a single continuous political structure. The Ottoman Caliphate, which ended in 1924, was the final major example of this governance model. Gabriel presents a historical casualty claim. She states 270 million people around the world were killed by Islam, 270 million, and we didn't have weapons of mass destruction. This figure is debated among historians who study conflict casualties across different eras. Historical death toll estimates vary significantly depending on research methodology, available historical records, geographic scope, and which specific conflicts are included in calculations. All major civilizations throughout history experienced conflicts involving casualties. Academic researchers continue investigating these historical statistics using different approaches. Gabriel makes an observation about historical education. While she notes, we in America have failed to educate our children about history, we in America failed to educate our population about history. Historical curricula often emphasize certain periods and regions more than others. Comprehensive study of world history, including various civilizations and their interactions across different continents and time periods, provides valuable context for understanding global historical developments.
Islam ended in 1924, the caliphate. People thought the caliphate will never be resurrected. The caliphate will never come back. But two things happened in the Middle East in the last century that made the Islamists be able to resurrect the caliphate. Number one is the discovery of oil in Saudi Arabia, which we were able to discover and were stupid enough to allow them to nationalize it. And the number two that happened was Ayatollah Khomeini coming to power in 1979. That gave the Islamists the money and also the spiritual covering in order to explode on the world stage. And people say, oh, well, the Wahhabis exported their Wahhabi radical religion. The Wahhabis are the name of Wahhab. They're not a different sect of Islam. They follow the authentic preaching of Prophet Muhammad, the way Prophet Muhammad lived and practiced his religion. This is why neither you or me or any infidel can step a foot in Mecca, because as far as they're concerned, we are filth. And as infidels, we're not allowed to step a foot, not President Obama and not anybody else. As a matter of fact, Al-Qaeda used to use Saudi Arabia and its success as an excuse to recruit members, as the example to show them how Allah has blessed Saudi Arabia because of the way they adhere to the tenets of Islam. And today we talk about ISIS. ISIS is not a new invention. ISIS resurrected the caliphate that ended less than 100 years ago. Except we are too ignorant and too uninformed to understand what ISIS is doing and why ISIS is succeeding. Two things you need to understand about Islam and the principles of war in Islam. One is the law of taqiyya, which means lying and deception. It means that a Muslim man can lay his hand on the Quran and swear that he is telling the truth, knowing that he is lying, but also knowing that the Quran will forgive him because he is advancing the cause of Islam. The second thing you need to know about is that the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah, which is an Islamic principle of war and a model on how to deceive your enemy when you have to sign peace treaties with your enemy. And it is based on an example by Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad was attacking the Meccans and their caravans when he was living in Medina. One day he attacked them because this is how he got the goodies. He would attack them, rob them, and spread the goodies among his men. And this is how he was able to recruit, because this is how people made money.
After the caliphate system ended in 1924, many observers anticipated this governance model would not return. Gabriel identifies developments that influence subsequent events: oil resources in Saudi Arabia and political changes in Iran during 1979. These provided financial capacity for various religious and political movements throughout the region. Gabriel discusses interpretive traditions within Islamic scholarship. She explains, the Wahhabis, they're not a different sect of Islam, they follow the authentic preaching of Prophet Muhammad. Islamic scholarship encompasses numerous schools of thought with varying approaches to interpreting religious texts and historical practice. Questions about which interpretations represent authentic tradition are extensively debated within Islamic scholarly communities worldwide. Conservative, moderate, and progressive Islamic scholars all reference foundational sources while reaching different conclusions about contemporary application. Gabriel mentions religious access policies in certain countries. She notes, neither you or me or any infidel can step a foot in Mecca because as far as they're concerned, we are filth. Some countries maintain religious restrictions regarding access to specific sites considered sacred within their traditions. These policies reflect particular interpretations of religious law and vary significantly across different Muslim-majority nations. Many predominantly Islamic countries welcome visitors of various faiths to most locations. Gabriel addresses modern extremist movements. She states, ISIS is not a new invention. ISIS resurrected the caliphate that ended less than 100 years ago. Certain extremist groups have attempted establishing governance based on their interpretations of historical Islamic systems. Gabriel suggests, we are too ignorant and too uninformed to understand why what ISIS is doing and why ISIS is succeeding. Analyzing extremist movements requires examining multiple interconnected factors, including regional political instability, economic conditions, sectarian conflicts, and how organizations utilize particular religious interpretations. Scholars from various academic disciplines and backgrounds study these complex dynamics from different analytical perspectives. Historical analysis benefits from examining diverse scholarly sources and acknowledging that religious, political, and social practices varied significantly across different time periods and geographic regions throughout Islamic civilization's history. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.